Hi, my name is Joanna Whitney. I am an intuitive artist and a student of natural law. Natural law are non-man-made immutable conditions which govern the behavior of beings which have the ability to discern right from wrong. And if we practice natural law on Earth, we would be free. You can learn more about natural law at whatonearthishappening.com. That's the body of work that I studied. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because that's the basis of all of my work henceforth. So in my exploring formal consensus, it's because of the basis of natural law that I stand on, which is basically that if I rule my own inner monarchy and get together with other people who are ruling their own inner monarchy, then we can have freedom together. We don't have to like each other. We can agree to disagree, but we can make decisions in an egalitarian manner. And so with that said, I'm going to move forward. I'm on page 31 of the Formal Consensus book. And the reason I'm exploring this again is because I've just noticed that, we've tried to form groups and a lot of people have been very successful at forming groups, but I do also notice that the groups reformulate and break apart. And when it comes to exit and build, which is something that, Derek Bros promoted and does promote every time he does a greater reset, I don't really think that we're at that point where we can exit and build together yet. And we don't even have to exit by moving away to a off-grid location together. We could exit and build simply by creating an alternative currency like a barter currency and bartering with one another, which is what I'm part of trying to do that. There's going to be a barter market coming up the first Saturday of the month at Valley Soul from now on, hopefully, and the second Saturday of the month in the Independence Institute in Denver, Valley Soul and Boulder. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue exploring these documents. And there's other documents also referred to in the back in the bibliography of this document. Quite a few are actually available for free on libgen.is, if people know about that. And others you could probably find elsewhere for free online at this point, because these are all really old, like Peace, Education, Division, American Friends Service Committee. So that's a Quaker thing. And it's called In Place of War, 1967. Building United Judgment, a handbook for consensus decision-making, 1981. A manual for group facilitators, the Center for Conflict Resolution, 1977. Civil Disobedience, Theory and Practice, 1969. No Bosses Here, a manual on working collectively and cooperatively, 1981. Resource Manual for a Living Revolution, a handbook of skills and tools for social change activists, 1985. more power than we know, the people's movement towards democracy, which I would say towards anarchy, because they didn't understand that democracy is a precursor to socialism, which we now understand. But that was 1976 when we were all happy. I remember that year. We cannot live without our lives, 1974. Nonviolent resistance, 1961, nonviolent direct action, 1968, a manual on nonviolence in children, 1977, meeting facilitation, the no magic method, 1983, nonviolence in America, a documentary history, 1966, the politics of nonviolent action, 1973, beyond majority rule, 1983, that's referring to beyond parliamentary procedure. People with People, a compendium of group process theories, 1977. War Resisters League Organizers Manual, 1981. Peace and Power, 2001. Clearness Processes for Supporting Individuals and Groups in Decision-Making, 1984. So you could go through libgen.is or any of the other, like zlibrary, z-library, archive.org. They may have these books available. All of these books are really about creating freedom for individuals by honoring each person's sovereignty, but it also requires that each person be responsible for their own behavior and their own attention, their own voice, empowerment, speaking up and participating, not reacting, not interrupting, minding your manners, basically. And in that regard, we could have real freedom together. So again, back to page 31, chapter 5, roles. A role is a function of process, not content. Roles are used during a meeting according to the needs of the situation. Not all roles are useful at every meeting, nor does each role have to be filled by a separate person. Formal consensus functions more smoothly if the person filling a role has some experience. Therefore, it is desirable to rotate roles. Very important, rotation. Even though, you know, once somebody gets comfortable doing something and then the group gets comfortable with that person being comfortable, then you don't want to change it. However, the problem is that we're mortal. And so everybody needs to know how to do all of the jobs so that if somebody kicks off, you can still run the meeting, or if somebody moves or whatever, and just to not codify it. You know, the spirit of rotation is very important in these freedom groups because you might have to pray to the creator for help if you're afraid, and one person doesn't become like the authority if the roles are always changing. So you could say, okay, the roles are going to change every 90 days. And you could do it like clockwise or something like that, so that it would just be sort of random. Clockwise, maybe alphabetical order or whatever. Agenda planners. A well-planned agenda is an important tool for a smooth meeting, although it does not guarantee it. Experience has shown that there is a definite improvement in the flow and pace of a meeting if several people get together prior to the start of the meeting and propose an agenda. In smaller groups, the facilitator often proposes an agenda. The agenda planning committee has 6 tasks. collect agenda items, arrange them, assign presenters, brainstorm discussion techniques, assign time limits, write up the proposed agenda. There are at least 4 sources of agenda items: suggestions from members, reports or proposals from committees, business from the last meeting, standard agenda items including opening agenda review, review notes, break, announcements, decision review, evaluation. So in other words, you could get your agenda item from the evaluation if something happened and it seems pertinent to the group dynamic to make things run more smoothly. Once all the agenda items have been collected, they are listed in an order which seems efficient and appropriate. Planners need to be cautious that items at the top of the agenda tend to use more than their share of time, thereby limiting the time available for the rest. Each group has different needs. Some groups work best taking care of business first, then addressing the difficult items. Other groups might find it useful to take on the most difficult work first and strictly limit the time for or let it take all it needs. The following are recommendations for keeping the focus of attention on the agenda. Alternate long and short, heavy and light items. Place reports before their related proposals. Consider placing items which might generate a sense of accomplishment early in the meeting. Alternate presenters. Be flexible. Usually each item already has a presenter. If not, assign one. Generally, it is not wise for facilitators to present reports or proposals. However, it is convenient for facilitators to present some of the standard agenda items. For complex or especially controversial items, the agenda planners could suggest various options for group discussion techniques. This may be helpful to the facilitator. Next, assign time limits for each item. It is important to be realistic, being careful to give each item enough time to be fully addressed without being unfair to other items. Generally, it is not desirable to propose an agenda which exceeds the desired overall meeting time limit. The last task is the writing of the proposed agenda, so all can see it and refer to it during the meeting. Each item is listed in order along with its presenter and time limit. The following agenda is an example of how an agenda is structured and what information is included in it. It shows the standard agenda items, the presenters, the time limits, and the order in which they will be considered. It also shows one way in which reports and proposals can be presented, but each group can structure this part of the meeting in whatever way suits its needs. This model does not show the choices of techniques or group discussion which the agenda planners might have considered. I'm just going to go on. Facilitator. The word facilitate means to make easy. A facilitator conducts group business and guides the formal consensus process so that it flows smoothly. Rotating facilitation from meeting to meeting shares important skills among the members. If everyone has firsthand knowledge about facilitation, it will help the flow of all meetings. Co-facilitation, or having 2 or more people facilitate a meeting, is recommended. Having a woman and a man share responsibilities encourage a more balanced meeting. Also, an inexperienced facilitator may apprentice with a more experienced one. Try to use a variety of techniques throughout the meeting. And remember, a little bit of humor can go a long way in easing tension during a long and difficult meeting. Good facilitation is based upon the following principles. This should be very helpful. Non-directive leadership. Facilitators accept responsibility for moving through the agenda in the allotted time, guiding the process, and suggesting alternate or additional techniques. In this sense, they do lead the group. They do not give their personal opinions, nor do they attempt to direct the content of the discussion. If they want to participate, they must clearly relinquish the role and speak as an individual. During a meeting, individuals are responsible for expressing their own concerns and thoughts. Facilitators, on the other hand, are responsible for addressing the needs of the group. They need to be aware of the group dynamics and constantly evaluate whether the discussion is flowing well. There may be a need for a change in the discussion technique. They need to be diligent about the fair distribution of attention, being sure to limit those who are speaking often and offering opportunities to those who are not speaking much or at all. This is very important. I've recently noticed, like I was recently at a presentation where the teacher spoke less than some of the members of the class. It almost seemed as if the members of the class should have perhaps had their own class. So it would be important to perhaps have a facilitator aid the teacher, so that the teacher could just be present teaching the class, and then the facilitator would help people who can't keep their mouths shut and pay attention for long periods of time learn how to be respectful of other people. This can be very off-putting. Most people these days apparently seem to just ignore discomfort and uncomfortable situations like this, and they don't speak up. And either they don't come back, or maybe they come back one more time. I don't really know. Usually I see people just not come back if their needs aren't met, but they won't say what their needs are. And this is part of our very difficult problem that we have today. People don't speak up generally. So I would just put that out there to people who are watching this video to please speak up and let the presenters know your true feelings so that they can be worked through, and then come back. Challenge yourself to come back. Let's see here. I don't want to repeat myself. It follows that one person cannot simultaneously give attention to the needs of the group and think about a personal response to a given situation. Also, it is not appropriate for the facilitator to support a particular point of view or dominate the discussion. This does not build trust, especially in those who do not agree with the facilitator. Clarity of process. The facilitator is responsible for leading the meeting openly so that everyone present is aware of the process and how to participate. This means it is important to constantly review what just happened, what is about to happen, and how it will happen. Every time a new discussion technique is introduced, explain how it will work and what is to be accomplished. This is both educational and helps new members participate more fully. Agenda contract. I think this is going to be maybe the last one I do tonight. No, maybe I'll do them all. The facilitator is responsible for honoring the agenda contract. The facilitator keeps the questions and discussion focused on the agenda item. Be gentle but firm, because fairness dictates that each agenda item gets only the time allotted. The agenda contract is made when the agenda is reviewed and accepted. This agreement includes the items on the agenda, the order in which they are considered, and the time allotted to each. Unless the whole group agrees to change the agenda, the facilitator is obligated to keep the contract. The decision to change the agenda must be a consensus with little or no discussion. At the beginning of the meeting, the agenda is presented to the whole group and reviewed item by item. Any member can add an item if it has been omitted. While every agenda suggestion must be included in the agenda, it does not necessarily get as much time as the presenter wants. Time ought to be divided fairly, with individuals recognizing the fairness of old items generally getting more time than new items, and urgent items getting more time than items which can wait until the next meeting, etc. Also review the suggested presenters and time limits. If anything seems inappropriate or unreasonable, adjustments may be made. Once the whole agenda has been reviewed and consented to, the agenda becomes a contract the facilitator is obliged to follow the order and time limits. This encourages members to be on time to meetings. Yeah, that's another issue I've noticed. There are certain people who arrive half an hour late every single meeting. It's very disrespectful, especially to the time that was agreed upon. But I mean, this is where we're at now, you know. I don't really know what to say about that any more than what I can say is to just encourage people. If you have a problem with lateness, try to show up early, and I bet you'll get there on time. Goodwill. Always try to assume goodwill. Assume every statement and action is sincerely intended to benefit the group. This is pretty hard these days because I think we don't assume goodwill these days. I think we pretty much all, I can't speak for everyone, but I could speak for myself. I have a negative point of view. I have to work very, very diligently at being optimistic. And I presume that everyone has a negative agenda. And I don't know where this comes from. You know, it's just been ingrained in me. And it's supported by the media, even on the internet with the alternative media. There's constantly problems being revealed. So it's very difficult. And I'm sure it's difficult for some other people to do this. But I'm challenging us to assume goodwill. Assume that each member understands the group's purpose and accepts the agenda as a contract. Often, when we project our feelings and expectations onto others, we influence their actions. If we treat others as though they are trying to get attention, disrupt meetings, or pick fights, they will often fulfill our expectations. A resolution to conflict is more likely to occur if we act as though there will be one. This is especially true if someone is intentionally trying to cause trouble or who is emotionally unhealthy. Do not attack the person, but rather assume goodwill and ask the person to explain to the group how that person's statements or actions are in the best interest of the group. It is also helpful to remember to separate the actor from the action. While the behavior may be unacceptable, the person is not bad. Avoid accusing the person of being the way they behave. Remember, no one has the answer. The group's work is the search for the best and most creative process, one which fosters a mutually satisfying resolution to any concern which may arise. So, you know, that's very important. And fortunately, in the group that I'm in that has decided to use formal consensus, there are two nursery school teachers. And I think this is a lot like nursery school. I don't have children, so I don't know how to do this classroom management thing. But I think nursery school teachers know how to put children in timeout, and that's simply what would have to be done. And they also know how to reset for optimism. So I'm going to be observing them in our group for sure. I'm going to stop here for tonight.